Nikki here. I'm here today to do my spoiler review for The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you haven't watched it, I will also have a spoiler-free video available. It should go up just previous to this one, so keep an eye out for it if you have not watched it and want to have a review of this book and not get spoiled. So to start, I'm just going to give you a brief summary, and then I'll move on to my likes and dislikes, followed by characters and the wrap-up. So I loved that this book had so much action in it. It really had a lot more action than the previous two books, and part of it is just because, as you get with a lot of fantasy books, especially if it's overthrowing great evil for the greater good, because it accumulates in this final epic battle, which is amazing. But then they also have the preparation for it. They have a few skirmishes kind of along the way to get the reader used to the action and to kind of give them an idea of, this is what the characters do, this is what my fave's gonna do, and this is how it'll probably play out in the long run. It was just, this book was a really solid read, and it was an amazing sequel. It was such a good way to end a series. And that's really all I have to say for the summary, so we'll move on to the likes and dislikes. Doing 3 likes and 3 dislikes, starting with the likes. The first like is Faramir. I loved Faramir. I loved him since we were introduced to him in the second book. But what I like about Faramir in the third book is how his character is more fleshed out, because it's not so much just solely from his actions and his interactions as a person, but it's like looking at his family unit. His Faramir, poor goddamn Faramir, has a crazy ass father, and he's just such a good and kind-hearted person, and he's loyal, and but his only failing, at least in his father's eyes, is that he's not his brother. And it was really interesting to see all of that play out, and then kind of be able to reflect on what Faramir did in the second book when you first encounter him, and a lot of his actions make so much more sense. I felt like with the family unit being present as part of his character development, I felt like Tolkien did a good job of developing him much more quickly. And then you got to get a lot more, for lack of a better term, face time with him over the course of the book. And I really loved that, because it really helped show his true character and show his true colors. My second like is Sam. I love Sam. He is just such a good and honorable man, and he's such a true and loyal friend to Frodo, and he will do anything, and I mean anything, for Frodo to help him finish this. And I love him switching to survival mode, for lack of a better term, and then going from survival mode to we need to get rid of this great evil now that I have experienced even just a hint of it. It is so important for us to do the action that is for the greater good, and I love when that becomes the driver, how everything plays out towards the end of it, with Sam being such a strong force behind Frodo. And my third like is the psychological manipulation that Sauron uses, which sounds really terrible because he's really evil. But I loved it because he just used his forces so effectively, and he really recognized that attrition and low morale were going to be really effective for dealing with man. Because, just the use of the Nazguls and how them with the Dark Riders were just such a constant, dark kind of bitterness to the present. And I really loved, because as you were reading, you could feel the effect of every time they were around, how the people changed and the atmosphere changed because of it. And I felt like Sauron really used that effectively, just very much to his advantage. He also did this with one of their first kind of attacks during the siege of Minas Tirith, and that was with decapitating the fallen foes and then launching the heads over the walls of Minas Tirith. That was so crazy, it was brutal, but it was so good at just it's like he took a grenade to the morale of the men stationed at Minas Tirith and just blew it to hell. And it was horrible, but it was so effective. And I really loved that it showed him as someone who was intelligent that did need to be outthought. He wasn't just some kind of bumbling great evil, and that hadn't really necessarily been touched on in the same ways leading up to this book, and that just, those actions defined that part of his character very, very well. And now on to my dislikes. My first dislike is that I wish we had more interactions with the wild men. Or not so much more interaction, but we got a little bit more information of them. They were useful and they were very specific tools. I just wish we had heard of them before, or that we had had a more effective development interaction with them. I found them really cool to read, and I really would have liked to learn more about them. And the fact that we didn't was a little saddening. My second dislike is that Denethor is an asshat. And by that I mean he is a terrible steward. But mostly what it is he's just had a taste of power. His family has had power for many generations, and he's not really willing to give it up. And so he's like panicking because his kids are dying and because Aragorn is coming to take the throne. And yeah, he has a little bit of a psychotic break, and he goes from being an asshat to just being like chaotic and not particularly awesome. And then my third dislike is at Minas Tirith, where you're at Pippin's point of view. And there's so much going on, and I wish we got to have Pippin interact with more people to find out what's going on, or that if we'd gotten to, say, go to Gandalf's point of view and kind of found out what's going on, because he did a lot of helping to set up and prepare for this attack from Mordor. And because it was just from Pippin's point of view, and because it was just of his point of view at Minas Tirith, and even though he's part of the guard now, he was not part of the preparations in a way that would have alleviated some of the pace slowing at this point. And it made me really sad that the book kind of moved reasonably quickly up to that point, stopped there, the story stalled, and it stayed stalled until they changed to a new perspective. It kind of sucked in my opinion. It wasn't like enjoyment breaking, but it definitely made that part of the book a lot harder to go through because there was so little happening. And with this, I am done with my likes and dislikes. I will now move forward with my characters. So there was really good final development of the characters. This final stage of development really allowed them to fall into the roles that they've kind of been building towards over the course of the book. And I really liked seeing everybody begin to fill those roles, and the development kind of peter out as the actions were coming up and each character was fulfilling what their kind of predetermined role was, and how that played out on the battlefield, and how that played out in Mordor, and how that played out in their actions after everything finished. And I loved being able to read all of that and get that nice resolution after the war, and how the characters stayed the same and both changed as the circumstances changed. Tolkien still did a really amazing job with the loyalty and friendship. There was so much going on with Legolas and Gimli and Sam and Frodo, and honestly, I wish we could have spent all of our time with those two friendships, because I loved them so much, and just their interactions were so interesting, and I loved the way they were so vocal about their friendship and their love for each other, and they were just not ashamed to just be like, I love this man, he is like family to me. That's how close we are. And I loved that they were so vocal about it. It was just so pure and was such a contrast to the dark times that it just did such good things for the morale and for my own enjoyment of reading. Within the characters, I also really liked the greater development of Faramir, as I touched on in my likes. He developed very quickly, and a lot of that is because he had so much influence from his family unit, and that was also given to us, which was really nice, which leads me into Denethor. And he is just all kinds of crazy, but some of the craziness has definitely come from just like his mind breaking, because his one son is dead, his other is deathly ill, his entire stewardship is falling apart because the king is coming to ascend the throne. Mordor is a constant threat, and Sauron could just attack any day, and there's nothing to stop him from just killing everybody at this point. This is still pretty early on in the book when this is happening. So yeah, I feel I feel a little bit bad for him, and then I remember what he did to Faramir, and then it's kind of like, I mean, nobody really deserves the kind of death he had, but he was not a good man. And then we come to Sam. He is my favorite, and I mention that every time I mention his name. His character was so well developed by the end, and Tolkien did such a good job of having Sam just be this amazing protagonist, and by the end I love that he just kind of has broken out of it and has just his own person, and Sam is the true hero of this story, and I know that's a pretty common consensus now, and I'm glad for it because it's the recognition he deserves, and I'm so glad that he gets that much screen time and that much recognition in the third book. And that's all I have to say about the characters. I'll just move on to my wrap up here. As I said in the beginning, this is a solid read. It was a really good installment, and it was just a really effective way to wrap up the series. It was just a really good end to an epic adventure. I really enjoyed my time spent with the characters and with the world. Tolkien did a good job of developing both and just allowing them to develop at a really natural pace, so you didn't get a lot of info dumps, and he maintained that all the way through the series. And it was especially evident here, where even though you got little tidbits of new information, it made the world so much more vibrant, and it was so much fun to read about this world. And it just overall was just a really, really good read. I would recommend this series to anybody who loves fantasy, although having read it as an adult, I really don't know if I would recommend this to a lot of teenagers. Unless they have an undying love of the movie series, then maybe give the books a shot. But I would definitely recommend this to any adult reader who really enjoys fantasy. It's just this crazy, dynamic, expansive world, and these great characters where even if you don't connect to them immediately, they develop so well over the course of the book that you can't help but love them in some way by the end. And like, this book held my interest the entire time, the same way the series did as a whole. And as such, the final installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, gets a 4.5 stars out of 5 for me. I really loved it, and I kind of wish I could read it for the first time again because I enjoyed the experience so much. That's all I have to say to you guys today. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.